Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Benjamin Cure Show on this Monday, November 4th, 2024. Following an amazing Week 9 of games, we have so much to discuss. I think we're finally at that point where we can start talking seriously about Super Bowl superpowers and Super Bowl contenders. I also want to talk about the trade deadline because that's tomorrow, and I think it is going to be more active than anybody is anticipating or talking about right now. We're going to get into that in a second. But wow, I mean, that was an amazing weekend of games. We are officially through the halfway point of the NFL regular season. I think 136 or 139 games have been played so far, about 138 to go. So it'll be really interesting to see how the rest of this NFL season plays out. Feels like we have more great teams and more specifically, more bad teams than ever as well. There are 9 2-win teams currently in the NFL, some 2-6, some 2-7 because of bye weeks. And there's going to be a lot of sellers to this deadline that I don't think people are accounting for. Let me start first with the game that I think was the most important yesterday. Not the Cowboys game at 1 o'clock. I'm not even talking about the primetime game last night, which was Minnesota Vikings versus the Colts. I think that 4 o'clock game, to me, was very important going into the week, and I'll tell you why. To me, the seeding and the way that it works in the playoffs might not work out this way, but that was the NFC Championship. Whoever wins the NFC, it's going to come down to those two teams. And I think the Lions proved yesterday they're probably the team out of the NFC that ends up making it to the big game in February because, to me, they just play cleaner football down the stretch. And even though Dan Campbell situationally sometimes worries me, the offensive genius of Ben Johnson and their ability in play action to just always find guys open, and the fact that Jared Goff has successfully completed his last 30 passes to Amon-Ra St. Brown, and Jahmyr Gibbs running the way that he does, and David Montgomery running the way that he does, and that offensive line holding up the way that they do, and playing as well as they did in the elements, and them overcoming losing Branch due to an ejection in the second quarter, and still looking arguably more dominant on the back end after they lost him in that game on the road away in Lambeau. They've now won 3 straight games in Lambeau, the first time since the 1980s the Lions have done that. That is the team that is meant to compete in December, in January, and in February. And to me, that is the team that makes it out of the NFC. I still feel really confident in the Packers, in my opinion. But for as much as I admire, and I'm a big fan of Jordan Love, he's got a little bit of Brett Favre-ishness to him that I just... You watch him play, and it's like, man, he's going to have a beautiful Aaron Rodgers arc to this downfield ball, or he's going to throw a pick. And it feels very Brett Favre-ish, and I think it's funny to me. I've seen memes before where it's like Jordan Love has two different, an angel and a devil over his shoulder. He's got Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre, and it feels like it when he plays because you're either going to see an amazing downfield throw, a highlight of the century, a throw that only a handful of quarterbacks on the planet can make, or you're going to see a boneheaded interception, very Aaron Rodgers and Brett Favre-like, and that to me is the Packers' problem in the NFC. It's the reason why, even though I'm a huge fan of them, and I think they're a Super Bowl superpower, they're not going to beat the Lions down the stretch in the playoffs, and I don't think they end up making it to the Super Bowl, but that is a really talented team. It's a really fun team to watch, and to me, I think my comparison to them would be in the AFC, like the Bills 2 years ago. We all love Josh Allen. We think that's one of the best teams in terms of roster construction 2 years ago when they signed Von Miller to that contract initially and how good he looked. That might have been 3 years ago now, but like just a really loaded team with a quarterback that we really like, but the quarterback under center can make some throws and make some turnovers that make you think, man, how is this guy, like it's a love-hate relationship with the guy under center. But that was an important game for me, and to me, it's going to be the Lions and the Chiefs in New Orleans playing in February for the Lombardi Trophy, and I think ultimately the Chiefs come out on top. They're playing tonight against the Bucs. We'll preview that game at the end of the show if we have time. But yeah, it's going to be the Lions at the end of this thing, and very happy for the Lions, very happy for Jared Goff, very happy for Dan Campbell and Amon-Ra St. Brown. I mean, that team is just loaded. That roster could not be any better. If you were picking any team's roster in the NFL, I would probably pick that one of the Detroit Lions. I'm not picking the Bills. I'm not even picking the Ravens. I'm probably picking the Detroit Lions just because of how evenly, or that might be a lie. I think to me, best roster in the NFL would come down to Baltimore Ravens, Lamar Jackson under center, Derrick Henry, Zay Flowers, Mark Andrews, that defense, those linebackers, that pass rush, that secondary, even though they've had a couple shaky moments and Marlon Humphrey hasn't necessarily played his best football over the last 2-3 weeks. But the Lions are right up there with the best of them, and I think that was an amazing game. Third straight game that they have won in Lambeau. First time since like 1988 to like 1991 was the time period. So very impressive. Let's get into this because I think we can, like I said, we're already halfway through the NFL season. So I don't think it's crazy to start discussing Super Bowl superpowers. To me, there are two teams. There are only two real teams that should be favored by Vegas to go to the Super Bowl. To me, that's the Lions and the Kansas City Chiefs. Those are the only two teams that should be truly favored to win the thing, because I think that's ultimately the matchup that we're going to see. I think there's 4 Super Bowl superpowers, in my opinion. Green Bay is a part of that, and I would say the Ravens are a part of that. Both teams that we like, but for their own reasons. I think Ravens are an amazing team, amazing roster, very well coached. Nobody's denying that. But for some reason, the Kansas City Chiefs and Patrick Mahomes and Spags more specifically and more underratedly have been that team's bane of their existence. So that's the only reason I don't put the Ravens above a Kansas City Chiefs team that just went back-to-back and might three-peat. And then I think when you look at the NFC with Jordan Love and Matt LaFleur on the headset, I just feel like that's a really talented team that does a great job of running the football, and you saw it with Josh Jacobs, but at the end of the day, like, the turnovers from Jordan Love and the undisciplined nature of that football team, and Jordan Love dropping a lot of snaps there. I know it was pouring rain the entire game, but like Jared Goff and the Lions going into that game, it was talked about a lot. They play in a dome all year long, and this weather was going to be terrible, and this was their first time not playing in ideal conditions, playing outdoors, and Jared Goff and the Lions essentially scoffed at that, and it ended up being the home team who Lambeau should be their advantage. It ended up being that team that struggled. So I think those are the 4 teams sort of in the Super Bowl superpower category. And then I would say just over on that Super Bowl bubble, there's probably 6 teams. It would be Detroit, Green Bay, and San Francisco. San Francisco has dropped a lot, in my opinion, this season in terms of what I thought of them going into the year. I thought they were one of those Super Bowl superpowers. To me, they're in the Super Bowl bubble. Still a very talented team. Still one of the top 5 teams in the NFL in terms of roster construction. But they're not quite as good as we thought they were going to be going into the year. A lot of that is CMC and realizing what that team is without him, I think. And then I would say the third team in the AFC that makes it into that bubble would have to be the Buffalo Bills. I think Josh looks better now, arguably, than he did with Stefon Diggs, which is crazy. Everybody's in love with the idea of having an elite wide receiver like a Justin Jefferson or an Amon-Ra St. Brown, and those guys are really fun to have on your fantasy team, are really fun to watch if they're on your favorite team on TV on a primetime game. But we've already seen two instances now of great quarterbacks, Patrick Mahomes and Josh Allen, losing their wide receiver 1, Tyreek Hill for Mahomes, and Stefon Diggs for Josh Allen, and then seemingly becoming better the next season. The season after Patrick Mahomes lost Tyreek Hill, he ended up winning a Super Bowl, winning the MVP, and had better stats than he had in years in terms of efficiency. Josh Allen, everybody said, who's he going to throw to? Keon Coleman can't be the wide receiver 1 for this team if they're going to actually compete. Josh Allen, to his credit, looks more efficient, more effective, and has way less turnovers this season than he did with Stefon Diggs. There is something to losing a, not necessarily diva, but a guy that you feel like you need to target all the time and feel like you need to force feed in a wide receiver 1 like a Stefon Diggs or a Tyreek Hill. And then as a quarterback, when you lose those guys, sure, you lose a valuable asset, but you also lose a little bit of a headache in the sense that I can just go out there and read defenses and play ball. And for the best quarterbacks out there, and for the smartest quarterbacks out there, like a Patrick Mahomes or a Josh Allen, that has seemingly ended up working to their advantage. So very proud of Josh Allen this season. I think he deserves a lot of credit. I believe he only has 2 or 3 turnovers this season, which is a record low for Josh Allen after several years of him playing his best football, but that also entailing playing turnover football or turnover-prone football. So a lot of credit goes to Josh Allen for that. To me, those are the 6 teams in this Super Bowl bubble as we're more than halfway through the regular season. Let's talk about this, though. Trade deadline. We've got about 48 hours to go, way less than that at this point, just over 24, I would say. We're doing this live at around 2 o'clock Eastern time. And there's a lot going on across the NFL, right? Dennis Allen this morning, about several hours ago, 3 hours ago, I would say, was fired by the Saints, not the Lions. And it ends up being both times his quarterback when he has been fired has been Derek Carr. That's a weird coincidence. That's just poor luck of the draw, in my opinion. But there's a lot of bad teams out there. And I think that is why people are not talking enough about the trade deadline, in my opinion, because people seemingly think, oh, the teams that are good, the teams that are bad are bad. There are 9 teams this NFL season right now. There's 9 teams through week 9 that have only 2 wins this season. They're 2-6 or they're 2-7. I look at the Patriots, 2-7, the Dolphins, 2-6, the Raiders, 2-7, the Browns, 2-7, the Titans, 2-6, the Jaguars, 2-7, the Giants, 2-7, the Saints, 2-7, the Panthers, 2-7. And I also included another team in here that we'll talk about a little later that not a 2-win team, but they're sellers of a major asset here. You may have heard the report yesterday. If you haven't, it's kind of a quiet one. I think it's interesting, though. So to me, there's several teams on there that I don't care about. Of the 9 teams through week 9 that have 2 wins, there's a couple teams out there that I don't really care for. Like, they've got nothing to trade. I don't care about the Jaguars at the deadline. I don't care about the Panthers at the deadline. I don't care about the Giants at the deadline. You don't have guys that I care about that really you can trade for realistically, or that you're going to trade away because it's guys that you just drafted, like a Malik Neighbors. You don't have anything to offer me. So I don't care about the Lions, I don't care about the Jaguars. I don't care about the Giants, and I don't care about the Panthers at the deadline. Or really the Patriots, to be honest, because they have a bad record, but they're trying to build for the future, and they're going to support Drake May, not throw assets out the window, unlike the start of the season. I know it seems hypocritical because they let Judon walk, or they traded him away to Atlanta. So there are teams, though, that are, based on their record, not good teams this season, that people are thinking, oh, they're going to hold on to that asset. Wait a minute here. Why are the Dolphins, who are 2-6, going to hold on to Tyreek Hill? To me, going into this morning, honestly, before Dennis Allen got fired, I thought for sure there was a non-zero chance that Mike McDaniel got fired by the Miami Dolphins this morning. Think about it for a second. You may think, Ben, that's crazy. You're coming off back-to-back losses after you got your star quarterback, who you just paid in Tua Tagovailoa, back, and you played as poorly as you did against the division opponent. Ben, it wasn't that bad. It came down to a possession. Yeah, but at the end of the day, that is a game that, once again, you had the lead in the first half, and you sort of not collapsed, but played significantly worse in the second half than you did in the first half. And Mike McDaniel, there was a rumor that was released in the middle of the game, a report that defensive coordinators have caught onto his offense, and it's the reason why Miami, even with Tua under center, hasn't been as lethal as they had been previously, and that he can't make second-half adjustments. Those two things in that report that were strategically released during the game ended up coming to fruition. They were true. So losing a game like that against the division opponent, and in reality, you realize you are not good enough to beat them out for the division outright. Yeah, I would suggest that team has some moves to make. Apparently, according to Josh Moser, who's a local reporter here in the Miami, Florida area, who I respect a lot, he had Drew Rosenhaus, who is a NFL powerhouse agent, but is also low-key an insider for the Miami Dolphins in a way because of all the dealings that he does with them as a local guy. He says apparently the Miami Dolphins are buyers at the deadline, not sellers. But there's the report this morning that Tyreek Hill is apparently, if he were to be traded, the favorite is the Kansas City Chiefs, which to me would be a crazy turn of events there, where they end up getting assets for Tyreek Hill. I'm talking about the Chiefs now. They let the Miami Dolphins pay his guaranteed salary, the big number, the contract that he wanted, and they got the best years out of him. In the end, they end up winning 2 Super Bowls without him in the 2 years that he hasn't been on the team. Patrick Mahomes, in that time span, wins an MVP of his own, and now if you could trade back for him, imagine what that would be. That is something to keep an eye on, but realistically, trade deadline. Ben, you keep on saying the trade deadline is going to be crazy. Look at the Browns, who are 2-7. Look at the Raiders, who are 2-7. If you genuinely believe that there is zero chance that the Raiders are going to say, you know what, we're 2-7 at the deadline, why don't we answer the Lions' call for Max Crosby? That is not as crazy as you think it is. Yes, Max Crosby is the heart and soul of that team, and he is arguably their entire identity right now, with Antonio Pierce seemingly not being as great of a head coach as they wanted him to be as a former player going into the year. Max Crosby potentially being on the chopping block, yeah, I would say that there is some validity to that rumor, and there is a chance that he ends up being traded. I don't think that's as crazy as people are making it out to be. The Browns have 2 amazing players. They already got rid of Amari Cooper before the deadline, but if you don't think that the 2-7 Browns are thinking, we've got Denzel Ward, we've got Myles Garrett, there's teams who need an elite corner, there's teams who need an elite pass rusher, there are teams that are going to be willing to sell at the deadline. Everyone has a price. Outside of Lamar Jackson and Patrick Mahomes, I don't know how many players do not have a price in the NFL right now. I think if you take a call, I think teams are willing to take a call more so than fans, I think, realize. Like I said, teams like the Jaguars and the Giants, I don't mean to bang on them, but those aren't good teams with anything to sell, so I don't care about them at the deadline. But the Raiders, the Browns, even the Titans, and the Seahawks could be a team to watch at the deadline. Ben, Seahawks are 4-5. There was a report released midway through the third quarter yesterday of that Rams-Seahawks game when it felt like, Were they losing grip of this game? Were they losing it? Because they had the lead at one point in that game, and they ultimately ended up losing to the Rams. Could they be sellers at the deadline? Reports are that DK Metcalf could be on the move. Could the Chargers grab him, who need an elite wideout if they really want to make a run at this thing, or try to get better because they really don't have anybody for Justin Herbert right now, even though he is playing very effective football and very efficient football? He's not playing his best football in terms of production and numbers, like the offensive numbers that we think are flashy, that we think are sexy, that we care about, the passing yards, the touchdowns. Doesn't have as much output from that point of view, is more efficient as a quarterback, but wouldn't you like to give your guy who's arguably a top 5 talent in the NFL an elite wideout like a DK Metcalf? He could be on the move at the deadline. I think the Saints at 2-7, who just fired their head coach, not a super talented team, but if you think there's not at least going to be a conversation about Alvin Kamara at the deadline, I think you're horribly mistaken. I think there's an opportunity and a chance that the Saints do end up trading somebody at the deadline. It could be AK, even though there was a report on October 19th that came out, and he denied those reports. He said, I didn't request to be traded, so if they trade me, it's because they wanted to, not necessarily because I wanted out. That is something to keep an eye out on. And like I said, I think it's going to be a busier deadline than people are willing to give credit for. I know there's other stuff going on tomorrow, of course, across the nation that people will be very tapped into. But trade deadline is tomorrow, and I think there's going to be a lot more movers and shakers than people are willing to admit, because there are so many teams with bad records with valuable assets that how could they not consider, you know what, this season is over. We're not punting on the season, but if we have an opportunity to gain some assets mid-season for the future, for the draft, get some more picks, load up on some more strategic picks, especially in the later rounds, why not make a move for it, especially if we're going to lose a player at the end of the season because it's a contract year or whatnot. Might as well try to get something in exchange for them. I think it's a very underrated subject right now in the NFL. Yesterday, I don't like to talk about social media too much, but Davante Adams posted a picture of him and Aaron Rodgers on his story, and he wrote something about essentially comparing the Jets to Rome and saying Rome wasn't built in a day. I'm going to try to be optimistic here. The Jets do have a very favorable schedule as we continue throughout the course of the season. I've been saying that for weeks. The Jets came into the season with the 4th easiest schedule according to Sharp Analysis. I have mentioned that multiple times. The problem for me with the Jets is Davante Adams can say the Jets. Davante Adams can compare the Jets to Rome and how they're not built in a single day and how they're getting better and how you can count them out and whatever. But it's hard for me to really wrap my arms around the Jets becoming an empire relatable or comparable to Rome overnight when you've got a 40-year-old quarterback under center who, yes, did show his mobility on Thursday Night Football and looked pretty impressive, but had a horrible first half. An offensive coordinator that I don't necessarily have a ton of faith in, who's technically an interim guy because the main guy was demoted. A new interim head coach who Coach Brick has seemingly put this team on his back in a way, but defense does not look better right now than it did under Saleh, and that was their strength. So you lost your best coach on the staff. You switched out your offensive play call, which was necessary, but now gives that team gives them some inconsistency under center with an older quarterback who is stubborn when it comes to learning new things. Your best weapon in Garrett Wilson, it required 2 touchdowns from him in a Thursday Night Football game against the decimated Texans team. One of the greatest catches I have ever seen, arguably the catch of the year. It took that kind of production and that play and that specific play from Garrett Wilson for you guys to win that game. This is not a team that I have a ton of faith in. I'm very pessimistic on the Jets moving forward. To me, I don't think I would pick them to win the division moving forward, even though I did at the start of the season. To me, the Bills are going to win that thing comfortably. It's not going to come down to the last week in any way, shape, or form. And I just can't wrap my arm around I keep on wanting to say the Lions for every story, around the Jets as this season progresses, because they are not what we thought that they were going to be going into the year, and they are a little bit of fool's gold. Speaking of fool's gold, one of the greatest highlights I have ever seen that I know is going to be in NFL commercials for the next 50 years of my life is that Saquon Barkley hurdle yesterday in the Kelly Green. A backwards 180 hurdle over the defender. They were playing the Jaguars in yesterday's game, and ultimately the Eagles won that one. It's their 4th straight win. Jalen Hurts has looked significantly better, but to me, I watched that highlight from Saquon Barkley, and as excited as I want to get about that Kelly Green jersey and the Eagles in general, and they've rattled off 4 straight wins now, and Jalen Hurts is playing cleaner football than he has. to start the season, to me, it's a little bit of fool's gold. To me, when I watch Saquon Barkley play and I watch that backwards hurdle and I watch the 180 play, I feel like Saquon Barkley is like a Bugatti in the trailer park driveway. Have you ever seen that meme? To me, that's what Saquon Barkley is for this Eagles team. I have so much faith in the roster. I think Saquon is amazing. I think he's playing with the best offensive line he ever has, which is not a hot take. I really do like the Eagles players, but it comes down to the coaching. To me, the trailer park in the meme would be the coaching. Nick Sirianni finds ways to try and lose games. You've heard this from Bill Belichick over the years, and I think this quote has sort of become a real staple of football and like the mindset of what it is to be an NFL head coach. Bill Belichick has always said you lose more games than you win in the NFL. That's just the reality. Coaches, there's a lot of bad and mediocre coaching in the NFL, and it's hard to win in the NFL. More games are lost than they are won. Feels like Nick Sirianni tries to find ways to lose games. And as well as Saquon Barkley played, and as well as Jalen Hurts is playing over the past 4 weeks, and as well as the Eagles team has played over the past 4 weeks, rattling off 4 straight wins, it comes down to a final drive against one of the worst teams in the league in the Jaguars. The Jaguars had an opportunity in the fourth quarter at the end of the game to beat the Eagles, and we don't think very highly of Trevor Lawrence or of that Jaguars team right now. That is an indictment on the coaching. We know how good the personnel is. We know how good that roster is. We know how good Jalen Hurts and Saquon Barkley have played together and how well that tandem when it comes to talent is performing right now. It comes down to coaching. And Nick Sirianni, I get it. His personality is kind of goofy. When he's winning, you love it. When he's losing, you're like, what the hell is going on with this guy? What is he talking about? But that is a team that is seriously, I said it all offseason, the only reason I didn't wrap my arms around the Eagles more in the offseason was because of their coach, was because of the guy on the headset. I don't think that team is bad, but I believe they're held back by their head coach. And it's the reason why if I had to pick a division winner going forward, I'm obviously not picking the Cowboys. I'm definitely not picking the Giants, but I would pick the Commanders over the Eagles. And I think next week's going to be an interesting game between the Eagles and the Cowboys. And I think Cowboys are sputtering out of control and Eagles have all the momentum. I think the Eagles win that game, and we'll preview next week's games. A way too early preview of next week. But man, what are we doing? What are we doing if we're the Eagles? To me, they're a little bit of fool's gold, and I think Saquon Barkley is the best asset they've got, and I think he hides a lot of their deficiencies. And I think that highlight from Saquon Barkley was enough of a highlight and was viral enough to distract a lot of casual NFL fans and maybe even Phillies fans from the obvious problems that exist within that Philly locker room with the coach. Okay, so let's move on here because I've got a lot that I want to talk about, and I'm running out of time. Last thing here before we go. You know what? Let's just preview next week. My way too early Week 10 picks. Some of these are favorites. Some of these are not. To me, Thursday Night Football, Bengals-Ravens. I'm going to pick the Ravens to win that one, even though we're arguably seeing some really good football right now from Joe Burrow. He's finally playing well. And this Bengals team, as they always do, slow starters, are starting to play better. Doesn't matter. Ravens are on a roll. I'm going to pick them to win that game. 9:30 a.m. Eastern in the United States. They're playing in London, though. Giants-Panthers. I'm going to take the Giants in that one. Patriots-Bears. I'm going to take the Patriots. A report coming out this morning from DJ Moore, who went on a radio show. He apparently did not give a glowing review of his head coach. The hosts asked DJ Moore, is the locker room lost? And he said, I want to say no. I listened to the soundbite, and maybe it's a little more dramatic when you read the transcript, but I don't think DJ Moore is being irresponsible. I think he's being very intentional with his wording on that call. He said, I want to say no. That's not a super glowing review or like endorsement of your current head coach. I think the Bears, things are starting to fall apart there. I would pick the Patriots at 2-7 to beat the 4-3 Bears. Bills, Colts, I'm taking the Bills. Vikings, Jags, I'm taking the Vikings. That defense is just too complex for Trevor Lawrence, and I have arguably the least amount of faith I've had in Trevor Lawrence ever in his pro football or even his football career in general. I'm pretty low on him right now. Chiefs versus Broncos. Chiefs, I think, win that one, which means they will be 9-0 because tonight they're playing against the Bucs. I think the Chiefs, I'll talk about this more next week or a couple weeks from now if they beat the Bills, but like there is an argument to be made that this Chiefs team, could go undefeated before they three-peat, because I think they're going to three-peat, and I've been telling you that for 6 months on this show already, before the season started, maybe even 9 months since last season. But this is not a team that's going to lose, and I'm very confident in them moving forward. Falcons, Saints, I'm taking the Falcons. 49ers, Bucks. I'm going to pick the 49ers. Bucks will be coming off a short week. They're playing tonight on Monday Night Football. That means a little bit of a shorter week for them. And the 49ers, are coming off a bye week. Kyle Shanahan coming off a bye. I'll take that any day and twice on Sundays, no pun intended. Commanders, Steelers, I'm taking the Commanders. Chargers, Titans, I'm taking the Chargers. Cardinals, Jets, I'm taking the Cardinals. If nothing else, that Cardinals team can score. It's two teams that I don't think I have a ton of faith in right now. But like I said, if there's anything this Cardinals team can do, it's put up points. It's put up offensive numbers. I'm going to pick the Cardinals in that one. Eagles, Cowboys, I'm taking the Eagles, and comfortably, whatever the line is, I would bet it on the Eagles. Lions, Texans, is it the Sunday night game? I'm taking the Lions, the best team in the NFC right now. And Monday, we will have another show before then, Dolphins, Rams, but this is no secret. I'm going to go with the Rams in that one. I think this, like I said, there's an argument to be made that this Dolphins team, even though apparently they're not sellers, are not as good as they've claimed to be. Quick note here on the Cowboys. They lose 21-27 to the Falcons. They allowed the Falcons to convert both of their fourth down attempts. I told you this in the offseason, and it's not that I'm not going to get too crazy over this. I told you in the offseason the Cowboys were going to be significantly worse than everybody thought they were going to be. When you paid Dak Prescott, you were essentially saying, Dak, we want you to do more with less, after he already showed you he couldn't do more with more. Dak has been paid twice now. I'm not blaming it all on him, but that roster is simply not good enough to compete with the best teams in the NFC, much less the NFL, and I think you're starting to see that now. And Dak Prescott saying, we effing suck on the sideline is absolutely an indictment on the team that they assembled in the offseason, and Jerry Jones' unwillingness to be a buyer in the offseason, even though he now claims they're going to be buyers at the deadline. Okay, whatever. That team is already done for, in my opinion, and the Cowboys, they can't run the ball. They can't stop the run. And right now, they're not even great when it comes to getting after the passer. That team is not as good as people claim it is, or as good as they claim they were going to be. And with that, that is all for this week's show. Thank you so much for tuning in. We've got an amazing week of football ahead of us. Trade deadline. It'll be more exciting than I think people are anticipating. Like I said, of course, election day tomorrow, so make sure to go out there and vote. I early voted, not this weekend, but last weekend. And yeah, make sure to enjoy this week. Don't take everything too seriously. But yeah, it should be an interesting one. I'll see you on Monday.